Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
Welcome. We are here for another just deep dive as we can get with another very complex but very stellar music band. We are talking Pink Floyd, and the guest today is Alan Cross from the Ongoing History of New Music. How are you, sir?
I'm cold. I'm bored. I am triple vaxxed.
As bored as Pink Floyd probably was.
Oh God, I just want something different to happen because I am dying. But anyway, all good things will come to those who wait.
Totally. We are getting into the space rock, the ones that at least popularized that term in some capacity. That is Pink Floyd. And so I had good parents, so I pretty much was listening to all kinds of 70s and 80s rock and pop. So I had no problem getting into any of their work, their various material, and their utter deep dive stuff. What was your introduction to them?
I think I must have discovered them on my own. I don't have any older brothers and sisters. My parents were highly uncool when it came to music, so I think I would have read about them in Rolling Stone when I was a kid, or I may have run across them while browsing in a record store. Probably a combination of the two. I read about them and I thought, oh, okay, so this is a band that I have to get into.
Totally. It's much like the Doors. They're not easy to talk about. They're not easy to sum up. They're not, it's not crystal clear, and you're going to have to listen to their material, a few different times to kind of get any sense of just all their Easter eggs, all their main key points of their narrative. Do you think they're getting harder to introduce, or do you think their music is just so pleasant enough that it's easier for people to get into their material?
No, if you talk to anybody who runs a record store that sells vinyl, they will tell you that albums like Dark Side of the Moon, Animals, Wish You Were Here, and The Wall are very, very hard to come by because everybody continues to buy them. Dark Side of the Moon remains one of the best-selling vinyl albums year after year after year, and more people are, once they get into that, it's kind of a gateway drug for them. They get into everything from about 71 through to maybe as far as the Division Bell, I guess, simply because it's music that doesn't sound like anything else. It's music that's emotional. It's music that's
very visual. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very theater of the mind, extremely well produced. And, if you turn, it sounds great with the lights off too.
Yeah.
Pink Floyd was one of the original headphone bands. People forget that people didn't start get into listening to music on headphones until the early 1970s. Consumer grade headphones really started to appear 68, 69. And by the time we get to 70, 71, 72, we had manufacturers like Koss making these big headphones that weighed, and I had a pair that weighed about 3 pounds. So the only way to really enjoy them was to plug them into your stereo and lie down on your bed. And there were a number of bands and a number of albums that became known as headphone bands. And Pink Floyd was one of them, simply because if you laid there in the dark and you had this music pumped directly into your skull, it was a really interesting experience because of the way it was produced and the stereo separation and the arrangement and all that sort of stuff. And it didn't hurt if you had a little weed or acid with you. And that became part of the allure for a lot of people. And Pink Floyd was a stoner band. They really were. You put on your headphones, you spark something up, and you listened and you tried to find deeper meaning in the music.
Earl said it. And they're not easy to describe either. I mean, and although I'm with you, I think they definitely were way more aware of what they were doing than probably say the Doors, because essentially, I mean, they're just reacting to everything, just Vietnam, just you kind of get a sense of just questioning their integrity, and everyone has self-doubt at.
They came from a different space. They came from the art school and the psychedelic scene in the UK, which was much different than what the Doors were doing in California with that sort of West Coast psychedelic scene. There were two different kinds of psychedelia, and the Doors represented a certain type, and Pink Floyd was another. They used to have these freak out shows at a place in London called the UFO Club, where they'd have wild light shows and crazy sound systems, something that the Doors never did. The Pink Floyd was very much, the Pink Floyd show was very much a immersive sensory experience with the lights, with the music, with the sound. And that's certainly different from the Doors, who were just more or less a straight sort of, here's a poet at the front of a rock band, try to impart some wisdom to.
Totally. And I think that's a good way of saying that, because different scene, different culture, different background compared to the Doors, and I think I was just trying to go into that, with a lot of drug induced music, everyone's trying to just, get a different perspective or interpretation from certain lyrics, and Pink Floyd's kind of a little more they're a little more blunt. I think they're just way more easier to figure out. And
I would say that they're more metaphorical, less poetic. Does that make sense?
Yes, especially with their war lyrics, and I mean, you're never lost in the whole flush of it all, where you're just like, I just don't know what they're talking about, but I dig the jam. No, it's like, no, you pretty much know what they're talking about. But I mean, even just from their better known material, I also just, you just know that some thought is going into it, regardless of whether or not you know the complete meaning of it.
Well, everybody in Pink Floyd was a university graduate. Went to Oxford and Cambridge. They had one acid casualty in Sid Barrett, and he was just sort of flavor for the whole thing, and he didn't really last all that long. But the band Pink Floyd they were into the mind expansion, but they were also into the intellect expansion. They weren't what you would call primarily a drug band. They became part of the progressive rock thing in the Rose in Britain, starting in the very late 60s with bands like King Crimson, and then became part of that whole prog thing, along with bands like Yes in the early 1970s. The difference is that Pink Floyd, their virtuosity wasn't in your face. If you listen to a Yes album, it was all about the brilliant abilities of the players, and so many prog bands were like that. Pink Floyd was more of a what can we do in the studio band with, and that's our virtuosity, what we create in the studio, which we will then struggle and figure out how to perform live at some point. But that's where their virtuosity lay, in the in the technology of the studio, in the ability to find new sounds, in the ability to blend those sounds in interesting ways.
That's definitely the best takedown because, like you say, both the Us and the Doors are the kinds where it's just like, I can't think of any rock, whether softer or harder or even metal band that hasn't had their same kind of modus operandi or influence, or hasn't not cited them as a giant inspiration. Because they were definitely about reworking the sound and how it actually sounds versus how they can modify it or edit it a bit, in addition to just how they interpreted their concert scene. That's solid. And I guess you could also cite up how they were make it or break it, I guess you could say. Nothing was keeping them from not continuing on.
Wait, are we talking about when they broke up?
Oh, well, just in their heyday before the various breakups.
There was a lot of tension within the band. I mean, it was all for one for all at the beginning. Sid Barrett and his acid casualty created some tension early on. He'd left the band, or might have been fired, or he just didn't belong anymore because he couldn't function. As time went on, the band was initially David Gilmour's band. He was the guy that was driving everything. But over time, Roger Waters' influence became stronger and stronger and stronger. And that became a point of contention. Now, if you just look at the early Pink Floyd, and we're going to go from let's say about 1970, it's mostly Roger. You hear mostly David Gilmour sing.
Yes.
But then you start getting into Wish You Were Here. You get into Animals, more Roger Waters. And then you get into The Wall, which is almost entirely a Roger Waters production. So his influence was the thing that took over towards the end of the 1970s. And that created all kinds of tension between him and David. And after a while, they just couldn't stand each other. And the band basically, broke up after, what would they have broken up after? I guess The Final Cut, which was even more of a Roger Waters thing. And they broke up, and there's still a lot of animosity there. They got together once for Live 8, and you talk to them anytime, they are adamant that they're done. They're never going to work together again. And there's a number of things that are getting in the way. Roger Waters has some interesting political views regarding Israel and Palestine and a few things that make him rather unpopular with some people. So it's never going to happen. They have I don't know who owns the name Pink Floyd, but Roger Waters has been doing. If you go see either one of those guys live in concert, they do plenty of Pink Floyd material. So there's nothing the other can do to stop the other from performing Pink Floyd stuff. Roger Waters has done a much better job of that with his massive tours and productions. And but if you go see David Gilmour, he's got to do Comfortably Numb. He does, Wish You Were Here. He does Welcome to the Machine and a few others. But it's too bad the way things ended.
Totally. Even though they were so talented and no one wanted to see them go, do you think it was good that they got out when they did? Because it would have probably escalated further. It just wouldn't have continued like that.
Based on the sound that they were moving towards in the 1980s, they were, I think, backing themselves into a corner. And the reason I say that is because if you listen to the production on, A Momentary Lapse of Reason and The Division Bell, those are very 80s sounding records. And by that, I mean, if you listen to the record, you can hear lots of, reverb on the drums, Just the way everything was mixed. It was, those records are very much of an era. When, by the same token, if you go back and you listen to Dark Side of the Moon or Wish You Were Here or Animals or The Wall, those records have a timeless quality to them. They don't sound of an era. They're just great records.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what could have happened is that Pink Floyd would have continued to go down this road of being too enamored with 80s style technology, and that would have not been very good. I mean, the last, songs like Learning to Fly, if you listen to a song like Learning to Fly, that doesn't sound like Pink Floyd in the 1970s. It's much bigger, bolder, the drums are louder, there's a lot more reverb on it. The synthesizer sounds that you hear are rooted in 1980s technology. In fact, I think one of those albums is going to get a remix, a reissue, and they're going to try and strip out some of the 80s-ishness of those records. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is it was they had been around since 1967. They had a really good run. They made some classic records, and all things must pass. So good, move on, and we'll just leave us with what you got, the best that you can do.
Right. I think that's definitely the best way to go about it, because there's so many other times when we watch a movie or a music video and we're just like, was this past their prime? Was this in their heyday? Because sometimes it doesn't always reflect the great talent that's on screen. And do you think they just play very well in general because that just their effort comes across pretty well for the most part?
Well, what would have happened, I think, is one of them, Roger or David, would have quit, and
eventually, yeah.
And, well, actually, that's now that I mentioned that, that's what happened. Roger quit, and Pink Floyd was never the same. You have to have those two guys in there. The other person that we should really talk about is Richard Wright. He was like the Ringo Starr of Pink Floyd. I don't think he got enough respect, and a lot of his ideas, from what I understand, weren't followed up on in the studio. He was just shut up and play your keyboards. Here's what we want you to do. That's the impression I got of his role. And he became alcoholic and wasn't as effective a member as he could have been. And then he died.
Wow. Yeah. Jeez. And I'm kind of also at that point where it just seems like many seem to know about him, but we see, do you think they just get covered less compared to other rock bands? It seems like everyone's all about just Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, the Stones. That's they don't seem to get as much attention nowadays.
Oh, who? Pink Floyd?
Yeah.
Oh boy, if you work in the classic rock radio field, they are a staple. They are considered. They're called what they would be called a core artist. And
they're a staple. I just mean like people talk about them as much.
Oh, I don't know. It depends on where you go. Depends on who you talk to. I mean, it's possible, but at the same time, Pink Floyd has never really been out of the realm of discussion, especially, with those amazing albums from 72 to 79. You have to be careful about making generalizations about who's being talked about and who isn't. It all has to do with the people that you hang around with. But as somebody who works in the music industry on a daily basis, I can tell you that Pink Floyd is very much alive, is very much under discussion and review and.
I'm sure they're discussed. It just seems like I just feel like they don't seem to get as much attention, or even with radio play, they seem to kind of just go for like a few basic tracks as opposed to a bunch of their other later great stuff?
Well, again, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, I work with a bunch of classic rock radio stations, and there's got to be 12 or 14 Pink Floyd songs that are constantly in rotation. Oh no, there's more than that. Because they play practically every track on Dark Side of the Moon. Then they will play about 4 songs from Wish You Were Here. They'll play a couple songs from Animals. They'll play half a dozen songs from The Wall. They'll play One of These Days from Metal. They go back pretty further than that. And then they'll play, what will they play? Learning to Fly and a few others from the last couple of records. So yeah, there's 20, 22 songs that are still being played on the radio today.
Nice. Well, maybe I just need to fire my radio stations.
Well, yeah, again, every radio station is different. But if you track what's played on radio, like I do, I can tell you that from afar, on a general basis, Pink Floyd continues to rule.
That's great, because I gotta wait for the morning for the good stuff to play. Oh man! So, why do you think The Wall was just so successful at just blending both their music into just, a fictional sci-fi story? Yeah.
Well, it came out at the right time. It came out right at the end of disco. And people had been waiting for a new Pink Floyd album for a couple of years. And when it arrived, it sounded like it was what the rock world needed to counter the oppressiveness of disco. It needed a big record that would show the world that rock was still alive and vital and could still do some great things. Now, remember too that rock was under assault, and this is how some people thought of it, from punk. Because punk was created as a direct backlash, in direct opposition to the kind of music Pink Floyd was making. It was stripped down, reactionary, bare bones, no frills rock and roll. And Pink Floyd had to come out and show that, yes, they were, one of these big, complicated bands. They had to show that they were still capable of doing that in the era of punk and disco, and they did.
Totally. Disco. Speaking of which, have you ever actually heard them be played at a disco?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, what happened was when Another Brick in the Wall was released as a single, that actually got mixed a couple of different ways and ended up being played in discos.
Sweet.
Yeah, and there was also a bit of a parody with Run Like Hell. It's got a really big, heavy disco beat.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, a heavy 4/4 beat, and that was kind of Pink Floyd's disco song, although they would never call it that. But that ended up being something of a dance club hit for in a very small measure.
Sweet. And I mean, do you also feel like it just because of the constant play and everything, it was just also just easier for people to be publicly aware of them? Obviously, yeah, we've covered that, a lot of parents, kids got into them, but I really am surprised how they kind of were able to break through while there's some other bands where it's like, I don't know why certain people don't know those bands as well.
Are we talking about when The Wall came out?
Oh, no, just nowadays, just introducing them. It seems like they're pretty commonly placed alongside Zeppelin or Van Halen.
Oh yeah, most definitely. If you go into a used record store, you will have they will tell you that it is there are a number of records that are very, very hard to keep in stock because young people keep buying them. Fleetwood Mac Rumors is one. Some Billy Joel records are another. Any Led Zeppelin records is one. And any Pink Floyd albums. If you can find a used Pink Floyd record in a used record store, buy it because in 10 minutes it'll be gone.
Right. Absolutely. Oh man. Well, more or less. Also, it seems like they. Who are the artists who you say are the most influenced by them nowadays? Obviously, many are, but like a current band who just cites them the most.
I would probably super current band. I would probably say that Tame Impala would be one. I would Radiohead definitely. Who else would be in that?
It's pretty hard, right? It seems like for the most part, everyone's going with Zeppelin or.
No, that's not true. I just haven't really thought about that. Give me.
Well, no, I just mean nowadays bands seem to want to just try and do as hard a tune as Sammy Hagar or.
No. I disagree. I disagree. If you listen to, for example, something like Sirius XM U, which is their indie channel. You'll hear a lot of artists who are heavy into electronics and heavily into heavy productions. Who could we call? Let's see. Well, I would look at a band like Spiritualized. I would look at a band like The Church. I would consider the Verve very much.
Verve, I could definitely get that. Just with their symphonies they got. Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the shoegaze bands like Ride and My Bloody Valentine. Consider, it would be hard to imagine a Tool if there had not been a Pink Floyd.
Tool is a good contrast because they were definitely modifying a bunch of music based on just various regurgitations of material they've grown up listening to. Well, it's good to know, and I should definitely take advantage of my work. I drive for work. I might as well take advantage of their Sirius XM radio that got in that car and listen to some more of these deep dive stations.
We got Tears for Fears. You'll talk to Billy Corgan. He'll say that he was a big fan and then he incorporates some Pink Floyd aesthetics for the Smashing Pumpkins. There's a metal band that doesn't get enough attention these days called Ghost that is definitely got some Floyd influence.
Yeah, just now they got like a giant single, but it took a while. They've been around here for quite a while, right? So.
Yeah, they haven't had big singles, but I mean they've been selling out arenas, which is really kind of strange. Really?
Because there's this one that's playing now on.
Yeah, but if you go to Europe, I mean these guys have been filling stadiums for a number of years now.
Man.
See, this is the thing about music is that you think you know what's going on based on what you see around you. But what I've learned is that it is the world of music is so big and it is so different from territory to territory and country to country that you're not really, unless you travel the world and actually see things on the ground in these other places, you don't have a proper idea of what's going on. I before the pandemic, I used to go to a lot of conferences in Europe and Southeast Asia, and I was astounded at how different attitudes are towards music in
Right.
places like China or Thailand or India or Australia or France or Germany or Eastern Europe or parts of Africa or parts of South America. What we think is the world of music is only a tiny, tiny part of it. You actually have to go to all these other places around the planet to see how big certain things are.
What might not
when you
so
had no
well
idea.
here is great in Japan or Germany. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Billy Talent, for example, can't get arrested in the United States, but they are massive in Germany.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Are there any books about the history of Pink Floyd that you would recommend?
Yeah, Nick Mason has a really, the drummer has a really good book. It's a big coffee table book that's pretty cool. I have one here on my shelf called Pink Floyd, Their Mortal Remains, another big coffee table book that I highly recommend. There are plenty written about them, but the more interesting ones are those that document things like their tours and also how they worked in the studio. I find that absolutely fascinating. I went to I think that's where I bought that book, as a matter of fact. I went to a Pink Floyd museum exhibit in the UK, which was called Their Mortal Remains. And it was a collection of all these instruments and stage props and other things from the band's career at the Victoria and Albert Museum. And it was absolutely fascinating to see the actual instruments that they used to make these seminal albums. And I'm pretty sure that's where I bought this book. I know I bought a little pig, like the pig that you see on the cover of Animals, because I just thought it was cute.
It is indeed. So I guess just closing thoughts, documentaries or anything that you would recommend.
You know what? I don't know of any. There's got to be some Pink Floyd documentary.
I would hope there'd be. There's definitely a behind the music special or something.
Yeah, there's got to be some. I know there's concert films. One of the shows that I wish I had been to, and I know there's a concert film of this, is that after the Berlin Wall came down, Roger Waters staged the Wall at Potsdamer Platz, which is where the Berlin Wall used to stand.
Oh, wow.
This was 1990, I think. And it featured this massive production of The Wall with all kinds of guest players, Van Morrison and Thomas Dolby and, a ton of others. There's a film of that. And it's very good. I just wish I had been able to see that show in person.
It sounds like a hell of a good time. Thank you so much for being on here. This was just a fun, just to the point, just quick deep dive we did. And thank you so much for being on here. Feel free to plug your show or any other projects you got coming up.
Oh, sure. If you can look me up on a daily basis. My website is ajournalofmusicalthings.com. It's updated every single day. And if you're into podcasts, I have my ongoing history of new music podcast, which you can get on any platform you choose to use.
Indeed. Thanks again. This was a hell of a time.
Easy. I'm one of my favorite bands.
Right? The writing was on the wall, literally.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy. African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
could you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
Greetings, friends. My name is Dean Legero, and I'm the host of the 3324 podcast. I invite you to join me and my lifelong friend Eric Kuber to come with us as we discuss the music and movies that shaped our life. Each week, we'll pick an album or film that we really connect to, and not only give you some great info and trivia, but also discuss, debate, and celebrate what it means to us and the journey it took us on. We also look forward to hearing from you and giving us some of your picks for us to check out and discuss. I think it'll be a really fun experience, so come along with us for the ride. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider and at 3324.buzzsprout.com. Thanks for your time, and welcome to the 3324 family.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes and gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy.
At eilfm.podbean.com.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up